you're looking around to everybody around you and everyone else is missing their lunch break, or they're all staying late and working late or doing those extra shifts or never looking after their own needs, then it can be really challenging. It may be that from a young age, you watched your parents or key caregivers doing it as well, always putting other people first, almost like, isn't that person amazing? They're always helping others. But underneath, they're really, really, really struggling. And we know it isn't sustainable to keep doing that. So I think giving yourself permission isn't about being selfish. It's not about putting your needs ahead of everybody else's at all costs. But I think it's about that balance you often talk about, of how can we do both? How can I give myself permission to meet my needs and still look after others?
Welcome to the Choice Space podcast. I'm Dr. Lee David, a GP, CBT therapist and author. Today, we're exploring the powerful idea of permission, those often unspoken rules that shape how we live, work and feel, from how we use our time to how freely we allow ourselves to experience emotions. Giving ourselves permission is about recognizing which expectations support our well-being and which ones we might choose to step away from. It might mean allowing rest, making room for change, or giving ourselves the freedom to acknowledge some of the emotions that we've learnt to push aside. To explore this further, I'm joined today by Dr. Caroline Walker, psychiatrist, therapist, speaker, trainer, writer, coach. She's the founder of The Joyful Doctor, supporting doctors to create happier, healthier, more fulfilled lives. And she's the author of the fabulous book, Permission: How to Feel, Heal and Thrive in a Challenging World. Caroline, welcome. Could you start by introducing yourself and telling the listeners a bit about your background?
Hi, Lee. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's really lovely to be here. So I'm Caroline, as you said. I'm an NHS psychiatrist and therapist by background. So really everything I do is around mental health, specialise in helping other doctors and healthcare professionals with their mental health and well-being. I do some clinical work for practitioner health, NHS practitioner health, and I run The Joyful Doctor. And through that, we do all sorts of different things to help improve the well-being of healthcare professionals. I do my own podcast. Hopefully you'll come on that one day. And we do trainings and coaching and there's all sorts of stuff. My main passion is helping doctors to really, look after themselves a bit better. We're very good at looking after others, and I'm really passionate about helping doctors to give themselves permission to put themselves first for a change.
So when you talk about permission, let's start by what you mean by that and maybe what led you to explore this idea for your book.
What led to it was that I was doing a lot of work with people who were struggling with their mental health from all walks of life, not just doctors. And every time I was working with someone that was struggling, there just was this theme that kept coming up that I noticed, where there was a lack of permission of some kind. So it might be really obvious at first, like they were maybe not giving themselves permission to take some sick leave or to ask for help. Maybe they weren't giving themselves a lunch break at work or leaving work on time. But other times it was a bit more hidden, but it was always there. And the more I thought about that and the more I explored it, I guess I became aware of just how powerful a concept it is. And of course, the key is that we learn to give ourselves permission. So it's not about seeking permission from other people, although that's typically what we tend to do as humans.
I often notice we want someone to tell us it's okay to do that. And then we feel better about doing it. We don't feel quite so guilty, when actually it feels really important that we feel empowered to make those choices for ourselves.
Yeah, it's absolutely okay. If you're thinking, right, I need permission to maybe leave work on time or take some sick leave, it's absolutely okay to seek the support and the help of other people to do that. And sometimes we might find it really hard to do it on our own to start with. So actually, sometimes it is absolutely okay to get that support and permission from others. But I think where I see a lot of people struggling is where they've perhaps looked for that support from others, it hasn't been there, and then they've just stayed stuck. They've just stayed like carrying on, trying really hard to keep going, but it just not getting anywhere, and things just piling up and getting on top of them more and more and more. And so sometimes we do just have to give ourselves that permission, even if others aren't. So I'd encourage it both ways, but essentially it's about whatever you need to give yourself that permission.
So it sounds like if you're in a supportive environment where people are going to really facilitate you to make healthy choices for yourself, then that's fantastic. And you can make it a shared experience where you collaborate around creating a sense of permission in order to put our well-being at the forefront of our choices. But there are times when that environment isn't as supportive. And actually, if we're waiting for that environment to give us the permission, it might not come. And then we end up a bit stuck if we don't then find it somewhere within ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even throughout childhood, as we develop into adults, we're constantly looking to those around us to learn what is okay and what isn't okay. So as a child, you might learn it's okay to walk down the pavement, but it's not all right to run in the road. And so we learn these rules for how to live. And quite often, those of us that struggle often are carers. We often are people that put other people's needs first. So parents, or maybe you're caring for elderly relatives, or just one of those people, right? You're kind and, considerate. If someone's struggling, you want to help them. And it can be really, really easy to just think, right, I've got to put them first. I always come bottom of the list. I always come last. And I think that's something that's culturally kind of normalized as well, particularly in westernized cultures. And certainly in certain professions more than others, like healthcare. If you're looking around to everybody around you and everyone else is missing their lunch break, or they're all staying late and working late, or doing those extra shifts, or never looking after their own needs, then it's really hard. If you've not been role modeled or given that permission by watching others do it to take those steps to look after yourself, it can be really challenging. So yeah, a lot of it is about the environment you're in, and also what you've been role modeled, I think, your whole life. It may be that from a young age you watched your parents or key caregivers doing it as well, always putting other people first. I think it gets kind of glorified, doesn't it? A bit like a martyrdom almost, like, isn't that person amazing? They're always helping others. But underneath, they're really, really, really struggling. And we know it isn't sustainable to keep doing that. So I think giving yourself permission isn't about being selfish. It's not about, putting your needs ahead of everybody else's at all costs. But I think it's about that balance you often talk about, of how can we do both? How can I give myself permission to meet my needs and still look after others?
I often talk about creating a space where everyone's needs are valid. So I have need for rest and I have need to support people around me, and they don't have to conflict. But what might conflict is how I prioritize my time. And so if all of my time is going into one part of life, then the balance is lost, isn't it?
A fairly typical pitfall for human beings. We tend to be quite all or nothing. And actually, I think the approach I encourage is, well, okay, maybe you can't meet all your needs right now. Maybe you can't kind of have a really nice lunch break and leave work on time and, all of it. But what could you do a little bit? Or could you do one or the other? So it's not just stopping and thinking, right, either I put everyone else first and not me at all. It's like, how could I do a little bit of both?
Yeah, so it's maybe moving away from the rule is I should always do this, which is a black and white thing that we stick to at all costs, versus, well, today I've got a bit of capacity and actually I'm going to stay a bit later because I do want to support my colleagues. Versus next week I can't because I'm really busy. I've got some long days and actually I have to get away and I've got other things that I really need to prioritize my time for. So does that feel like how it works?
Definitely, yeah. We want permission to be able to go the extra mile, really help someone out when they're having a tough time, maybe temporarily put our needs on hold for an hour or two while we, support someone else going through something. We absolutely want to still do that, right? Because we're compassionate, loving human beings, and we want to be connected to others in that way. So again, it's not about the all or nothing. It's not like, no, I can't do that. Sorry, I've got to leave. It's about that choice, and it's about not doing it one way or the other every single time. Because if every time we put other people first, we're gonna really struggle and burn out.
That's really important, getting that balance and flexibility. I was really interested when I was reading your book. You talk about some of the different types of permission, and I noticed that some of them relate to emotions. So giving ourselves permission to feel, maybe to feel fear, maybe to grieve, maybe to feel angry. So lots of different emotions, a whole range of human experience. And then also some of them relate to choices and actions. Do you think there's a difference in how we would approach permission in those two different circumstances?
I mean, the short answer is no, not really. If you wrote down the sentence, I give myself permission to ... and then you finish that sentence for yourself, you'll come up with all different answers at different times, depending on what you need. You can use it to kind of give yourself permission to feel how you're feeling, but also permission to do something or not do something. And that's really important too. That kind of idea of permission to say no, that's a really common one that people often feel they need to do more of. Permission to take a break, permission to pull back from a commitment that you've already committed to. So yeah, it can be emotions, it can be actions, but it really is the same process. It's that kind of noticing what it is you need and allowing yourself to do that, to feel that feeling or to do that thing.
There's a really important thing about listening or hearing ourselves. I'm wondering if we need sometimes to make sure we do have a pause and actually really listen to what the answer is to that question you gave there, which is, what do I need to give myself permission for today?
Yeah, yeah. So I think of it as noticing. We're so busy these days, aren't we? A million tabs open at once, on autopilot, rushing around, trying to get everything done. I think what you said is really important. If you take a pause, even if it's just for a second or two, and just check in and think, what am I noticing right now? And often it's something quite straightforward and quite physical. It's HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So, if I'm really thirsty, I haven't had a drink. Okay, I'm going to go get some water. That's permission, right? Permission to meet your basic needs. If you notice, oh gosh, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I could do with a hug or to vent to a friend. So again, it's noticing it and naming it. And I think that's something we're not necessarily taught how to do that. It's something we often learn in later life when we've been through a really difficult time. And we suddenly realize, oh, I've not really been noticing. I've been so busy helping everyone else and trying to get through life and, keep all the plates spinning. I've not really noticed what's going on for me. And quite often people are like, I don't know. I don't know what I need. So it can take a little bit of time and a bit of practice to check in. And there's some basic tools that can help with that. Things like, feeling wheels, where you can it helps you to pin down what it is you're feeling, or like things like the acronym HALT. I love that one because so often hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So often it is one of those. I do sometimes add on a C to that, HALT-C, for cognitive load, because I think, in this day and age, we're living in an information age, a technological age. We are often overwhelmed by the amount of information coming at us, and the load that has on our brain is enormous. And sometimes it's just too much and we just need permission to put it down. Just like, no, I'm going to turn my phone off tonight, or I'm not going to read that email.
I completely relate to the cognitive load. I think I sometimes describe it as being like a funnel, and there's just too many balls in the funnel and they get blocked and they start spilling over the top because there's just too much to think about and too much going on. And we just hit an overwhelm moment where our brains can't keep up with that level of information that's coming in. And I wonder if we sometimes turn to some things like maybe scrolling on our phones that are sort of a distraction from some of the difficult feelings, but actually add to cognitive load because we then notice there's something really awful in the news, or there's that email I was supposed to reply to, and it just kind of rolls on and it's never ending.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, two different types of activities in that situation, aren't there? There's the ones that we think are helping us relax. And in some sense, they kind of are, because we're kind of zoning out and we're not like actively having to do. But as you say, they're adding to the stress, because often we'll end up in a negative loop with like comparing ourselves to others, or feeling negative about some part of our life, or we feel drained, right, because there's more screen time, more information to take in. And then there's the other activities which are really genuinely relaxing and replenishing and re-energizing, things often that involve nature, the natural world, like going for a walk, or something that's kind of an activity that you'll do but is not involving screens typically, and information, and more stuff like, doing a learning to crochet or doing a crossword puzzle or something like that, where your brain is allowed to go into a different mode for a bit. And actually those activities tend to be genuinely more replenishing for us if we're feeling overwhelmed.
Having a range of different types of activity to match what we might need. And it was back to that key point that you said about listening and noticing. I've been on a screen for work all week and I really need a break, versus actually I quite like, sometimes people like to lose themselves in a video game, and it can be very replenishing for some people.
Again, it's back to permission to be you. So what works for you might not work for me. And it's really personal. This whole wellbeing thing, there isn't one size fits all. So it really is about going, when am I happiest? When do I feel most relaxed? When did I last feel like that? Oh, I remember when I used to do X, that used to make me feel really good, or, re-energize. Then follow those cues and give yourself permission to do that stuff. It doesn't have to look how you think it has to look. We're up with a lot of people who put themselves under a lot of pressure to do things a certain way. I remember coaching with one lady who said, I really want to develop a yoga practice. And I thought, oh, okay, that sounds fairly straightforward. Tell me a bit about that. And she said, well, I hate yoga. Like, I've tried it so many times and I just can't get on with it. I find it really difficult. It really stresses me out. And I was like, well, okay, that's really interesting. Like, why would you want to develop a yoga practice, right? But she got it into her head that that's what you do. Like, if you want, and I asked her, what is it about it that you really want? And she said, well, actually, I want some time each week that's carved out for me, where I can sit somewhere quietly, not be interrupted, to be with my thoughts, be with my body, maybe relax, stretch, just to be. And so that's what we did. We helped her to develop that kind of practice. So again, I think it's really about giving yourself permission to stop and think, what is it I really want here? I don't have to do it like everyone else is doing it. What brings me joy and brings me alive? And give yourself permission to do that.
Maybe there's something about when we're deciding what we need to give ourselves permission for, to notice again what energy is driving those choices and just be aware, is it actually my people pleaser? Is it actually my driver? Or do I need to make sure that it is really something that works for me? Because I'm just hearing some shoulds for that person. I should do yoga and I should enjoy it. And if I don't, then I'm somehow doing it wrong. And there's a sort of self-critical flavor that comes through there a little bit.
Definitely. And I think this stuff can be built up over a lifetime as well. We've told ourselves these stories year upon year about us going to the gym or losing weight or you name it, right? We've all got those repeated stories that go on in our heads. And I think it's sometimes when we start to actually give ourselves permission, we might not really know for sure, is this something I genuinely enjoy or is this something that I've always just done? And so it's about being really curious and really open and going, well, okay, I'm going to try it. Today, I'm going to do a bit of whatever, a bit of yoga or a bit of crochet or a bit of whatever it is and see how it feels. Notice where you kind of do enjoy the bits, do more of that. And then, so you might be going out for a walk and thinking, well, I really like the fact that I'm walking, but I'm not really enjoying walking in this particular place. Maybe try another walk somewhere else. Maybe you're doing some crochet and you think, well, I'm really enjoying sort of sitting and doing something with my hands, but I'm not actually really enjoying the process of the crocheting. Maybe I'll try some cross stitching or a crossword. So again, it's about that openness to notice and to take in that feedback, and to give yourself that permission. You don't have to stick to it. Yeah. It's the other thing. People will be like, right, I'm going to go run a marathon. And they get up to running about 5K, 10K, really enjoy it. And then they go past those distances and start to really not enjoy it. And it's absolutely okay to stop and go, maybe I'm a 5K runner, maybe I'm a 10K runner, not a marathon runner. Like, it's really okay to give ourselves permission to try something, continue it, or not, try something else.
So kind of permission to experiment, to discover what connects, and what might connect on one week might vary on another time.
Absolutely. And certainly different stages of life. So you might find there was something you used to love doing when you were a teenager or a young adult that now later in life you don't enjoy so much, or vice versa. Something you've always thought you hated, sometimes worth giving it another try because you might enjoy it now.
I sometimes talk about doing things really badly. So I would aim to be a really bad runner, for example. I think I am a pretty bad runner. So I go out and run pretty slowly. That's my goal. I don't want to get any faster. And I really enjoy that. And it's quite social because I would go with a neighbour. And so we have a chat and it starts our day off. And it's just a really lovely kind of part of my routine now. But it's very nourishing because I have set that goal that it's not about getting faster or fitter so much as just turning up and having some time together.
Yeah. And so that's a great example of where you've worked out what it is about it that works for you. Whereas somebody else might be like, no, that doesn't work for me because actually I really like the feeling of being good at something. So they might need permission to just do the stuff that they're good at and not try lots of new things because they hate trying new things or they hate not being good at stuff. So, it's either way, again, it comes back to that like individual permission. It's about that honesty. So often people will grow up with really kind of strict ideas and rules put in place, like, oh, you must do this or you must do that. Ideas like you must always work really hard or you must always do your best. And it's like, well, do I need to do my best? Like, if I'm just going out for a run, does it matter that I'm not the best runner in the world? So it's just gently sort of looking at those things and challenging them slightly. And again, giving yourself permission to do it in a way that you enjoy.
This is the Choice Pause, a 2 to 3 minute tool you'll hear in every episode, each time with something different to help you pause, notice, and choose your next step. These are practical tools drawn from my books and online wellbeing courses. You'll find links to these in the show notes. Take a slow breath in and a longer breath out. Notice the air moving through your body, the rise of your chest, the softening as you exhale. Let go of any tension in your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and feel the support beneath you. Perhaps notice the chair, the floor, or the ground that holds you steady. Now quietly ask yourself, what do I most need permission for right now? Take a moment to notice what comes up without trying to change it. It might be permission to rest, to feel sad, to stop striving, or to speak honestly. Maybe it's permission to take a break for a few minutes, to say no to one task, or to ask for support. There's no need to rush to find the answer. Simply notice what arises and hold it kindly as if you're listening to a close friend. And when you're ready, quietly say to yourself, I give myself permission. Let those words land. I give myself permission. Notice how it feels to offer yourself permission, whether it brings relief, resistance, or something in between. Take one more steady breath and carry this gentle sense of permission with you into whatever comes next in your day. You mentioned, a really big one, which I would certainly see a lot with people I'm working with, which is people who struggle with saying no, giving themselves permission to set boundaries, not to always put others before them.
Yeah.
Why do you think we find that so hard? Because in some ways it's straightforward, and a no feels like, well, no's a one-word answer. It's very clear. There's lots of information about assertiveness out there.
Yeah.
It still feels like it's something that's
Yeah.
very difficult to do.
Yeah, it's very, very common that people struggle with this one. But actually, interesting, if you think about it, most people will find it easy to say no to some things. So, for example, you might say to someone, would you like an extra scoop of ice cream? And they'll be like, oh, no, thanks. I'm fine. I've had enough. Or, so there's a lot of times in life where even those of us that find it hard to say no can say no, right? But the difference is, I think, with the ones where we struggle is the value judgment we place on that and what it means about us as a person. And typically we've been role modeled that you should always, again, there's that should word, should always, be a kind person, try and help others, put other people first. And we see this really clearly in industries like healthcare, for example, where a nurse or a doctor or a pharmacist has this kind of like heroic image. So there's this kind of these cultural beliefs, there's these family-based beliefs that you may have been given your whole life. You've been surrounded by and swimming in this water that says that we should, it's a good thing, to put others first. And actually, I think a slightly more healthy way to look at it, and some cultures do this, is it's not an either or. It's absolutely okay to have a healthy sense of self-esteem and to look after your own needs. And actually that helps you to look after others better, right? We know that people who take care of themselves, who are well rested, who are well fed, well watered, supported, are happier. They're safer in their work. They're more effective. They're able to give more to others. There's that famous saying, isn't there, about you can't pour from an empty cup. Yeah, it's exactly that, right? If we fill up our own jug first, if we look after our own needs, we can then pour into others' cups. So yeah, I think it's about gently challenging that kind of those ideas and those rules that we've been living in. There's some good in it, don't get me wrong, like it's wonderful to help other people, but if we do it completely at the expense of our own well-being, it's just a disaster. We end up broken out, unable to really help others, and we role model it to the next generation as well. We perpetuate that ongoing myth.
Maybe some of it is about our basic needs. If we've had enough sleep and we've had good nutrition and we've taken care of ourselves, then we're already in a better place to make some wise decisions about how to give ourselves permission and what we need to say yes or no to. I think when we're exhausted and got caught up in a cycle where we feel like we're on a treadmill and we're constantly running uphill, then we end up trying to cope as best we can, which often involves following the same old patterns over and over, because it's almost easier to make a choice that you've done many times before.
Definitely. And I think when we're struggling, we tend to try and solve the problem by doing. more. And actually what we need to do is the exact opposite, right? So I think of it as like being in a whirlwind, right? When you're feeling totally overwhelmed and there's so much going on and you're really exhausted, what you need to do is step into the center of the whirlwind where it's really calm and still and quiet. So all this stuff can still be raging around you, right? All the stuff of life, your children might be struggling, or your work stresses, or your health problems, or all these other things you're worried about still going on. But you're kind of standing in the center of that, nice and calm, just reminding yourself that actually I'm okay today. Like, I've got a roof over my head, I've got food on my plate, I'm all right just in this minute. Yeah. And calming down. Because when we're in that whirlwind, when our thoughts are racing and we're really struggling, we don't make the best decisions. We tend to make things worse, trying to make it better, but it's like we're like paddling faster, right? To try and get less exhausted. And actually what we often need to do is just pause or stop. It doesn't come naturally. But when you do it, you'll feel it almost instantly. You'll feel a sense of relief, a sense of your body starting to calm down and letting go a little bit. And then you will start to make more rational, more sensible choices.
I love the idea of standing in the middle of this whirlwind and this peaceful space and everything whirling around and just thinking, I don't have to get involved with all of that just at this moment. I just give myself permission to just step out of the crazy whirlwind just for a moment.
So that's another way that I do. So often I'll use this whirlwind metaphor, but you can either, like, some people like to stand in the middle. Some people like to step out of it and let the whirlwinds whirl away from them.
Whirl away.
Yeah. I know one person I work with she imagines there's lots of little whirlwinds for the different things that are going on, but she's sitting in a nice comfy armchair and she's sort of watching them all from a distance. So it just decenters you from it, because when you're in it, and even if you're in the center, you will feel that pull, right? You'll feel the pull of the thoughts. Oh, but I've got to think about this. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. You'll feel it. But if you can just resist that just for a moment and just stay still, and if we can calm our bodies down a little bit, then our thoughts will follow.
You gave a really powerful description about how we can learn some of the more unhelpful beliefs. We also need to acknowledge that they also are helpful in, it's not that they're fully negative. Being a people pleaser means that we're often very kind. We often have great relationships. We're often a really lovely person. So it's not like we have to throw that out. But equally, if it's extreme, it might mean we're ignoring our own well-being, which is probably back to the empty cup idea. But I'm just wondering if you've got some thoughts about what helps people to start to break free from some of those old rules, which can be quite powerful and almost hold us in their grip to the point that it becomes difficult to even see alternatives.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. These beliefs that we've held for a long time are often quite helpful. There's a reason we do them, right? There's a reason we keep doing what we're doing, and because they do have benefits, but they also have downsides. And I think it's just about acknowledging that there might be an alternative that is just a little bit more balanced. So it's not either or. It's and. So how can I still be a really nice person and still help people, but also at the same time, make sure that I'm meeting my needs as well? And I always say, start really small, start really easy. So often when we're thinking about like making a change, like we think about, I want to get fit, or I want to take on a new challenge, or we'll often like jump straight to the hardest route, or think, this is going to be really hard work, or this is going to be really difficult. And I always say, look, what would make it easy? So if you're thinking about taking it running, what would make it easy? Well, what's the first thing? Maybe you go and buy some trainers, or maybe you look up a running plan on the internet, the first step. So breaking it down into little things that feel easier is a really helpful way to approach it. So if you're going to start saying no to people or putting in firmer boundaries with people, it is a challenging thing, and people might react a little bit to it and be like, whoa, what's going on here? Suddenly you're just a different person. You're not like doing everything I ask anymore. Actually, start by saying no to somebody fairly safe. So start with someone that you've got a reasonable relationship with. You know that they're going to tolerate it if you start to say the odd little no to something or assert your needs over theirs. Start with something small and safe. So an example might be, if you're not used to being the one that's assertive and making the decisions, maybe the next time you and your partner or your family are deciding what to have to eat, you set yourself the challenge to decide it's going to be something that you want, right? And you say, actually, I'd really like to have, pasta tonight. So maybe choose something that doesn't feel very threatening. So I wouldn't go straight in. Often people have the deepest and hardest emotions around this stuff with their family of origin. So often it's, I really need to start saying no to my mom or my dad or my brother or something like that. Yeah. I'd say don't start there. Start somewhere a little bit safer, like your partner or your friend, and just practice, because it is like a muscle. And it's a bit like going to the gym for the first time or starting to run. You've got to start with a 2 or 3 minute run, not a 20-mile marathon.
I love that. So we could just build up. We can get confidence in how to approach it. And I think often when we do these small boundaries, actually it frees us to maybe have more flexibility in how we approach some of the more complex situations, because it's not always a black and white yes no situation. There's often nuance and complexity and personalities and relationships that we, like you say, with our families that we've had for decades. And so it's not likely to be solved by just a one-off no, I suspect.
No, absolutely not. And like I say, some people might respond they'll be absolutely fine with it. And you'll be like, oh, well, that was easy. And then you do that a few times, you build your confidence. Other times people might be like, whoa, okay, this is different. And you might end up in a bit of an argument or something. So it can be a bit challenging at first. And I think it's important we don't set ourselves a really unrealistic target of trying to say no to everybody and no to really big things to start with, because then we're going to get negative feedback, right? We're going to have a bad experience and we're going to be like, right, well, I'm never saying no again. Like, that's it. I tried it. Didn't work for me. But yeah, what we want is to build a little bank of like, oh, okay, I've said no a few times and that's been okay. So the next time, maybe you're a little bit more confident, you try something a little bit harder. The other thing you can do, you can kind of have fun with it as well. Like, I was working with a doctor the other day and doing some therapy around how she was communicating in her relationship. And we devised a little exercise for her and her husband to try, where they would imagine that they both wanted to have a different takeaway for dinner. So one would want Chinese and one would want Indian, for example. And then they had to come up with alternating different solutions to this problem. So one might say, okay, well, why don't we have Chinese this time and then we'll have Indian next time? Or they might say, well, why don't we have neither, but we'll do something else. We'll get an Italian, for example. We both like that. Or another idea might be, well, I'll order from the Indian, you can order from the Chinese, but we'll eat it together. And you do this. If you do this 3 or 4, 5 times, suddenly you start to, again, loosen up that idea of like, it's not about whether I say yes or no to you. It's about us just like being a bit more free with this and trying on things for size and giving ourselves permission to come at it from a different angle. Yeah, sometimes you'll compromise, sometimes you won't. And that's okay. We're not really meant to say no to everything. It's meant to be a bit of both, isn't it?
Exactly. And what comes through to me there is this idea about someone having dinner with their partner, and what's the purpose? Why is it important to have dinner? And it's obviously something about the relationship and wanting to spend time together, wanting to connect. And so the strategy of what the dinner is probably much less down the priority list than how do we communicate? How do we have a nice time together? How can we listen to each other? We jump in sometimes straight to the, is it Chinese or Indian question, when we're missing the whole important stuff, which is how do we build this relationship and make sure that we're spending enough time together, because we're both so busy at work and I actually haven't seen that other person for a week because we've both been doing different shift patterns.
And so when you do this exercise, what often happens is someone will say, well, the reason I wanted to have Chinese is because I just had that lovely memory of that meal we had together that time. And so it was about that reconnection and that having that lovely time together. Or they'll say, well, the reason I really wanted Indian was because I don't know, I feel a bit bored at the moment and I feel like I want something a bit different. And often permissions aren't just about the thing. So permission to leave work on time isn't about leaving work on time. It's about having time with your kids when you get home. It's about not feeling like you're being taken advantage of by your work colleagues. Or it's about the fact that you're tired and, you need to relax, or you want to have some fun doing something different. Or so that, it's never really about the actual thing. It's often about something else. And I love the way that you bring that focus to it, that value, like what is really important here? Why is it important to me to give myself permission to do this?
Yeah. And I think, so that comes back to where we started with just noticing and listening to that deeper value and not jumping straight to the answer about this is the outcome that we need, as much as what do I want this to be about? And I think that's really, really powerful. Some of the people that I have worked with, we talk about emotions, but they get quite fearful of feeling their fear or feeling their grief or feeling their sadness, because there's a real fear it's going to somehow wash me away. And so the strategy is I'm going to try and ignore it. I'm just going to block it down. I'm going to get on with it. La, 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 nothing to see here. I'm fine. And it builds up. And then there's this tidal wave. And I wondered how you might approach helping somebody to lean in to be able to permission to feel, but without getting washed away by feelings?
Yeah, great question. It is a really common experience with emotions. And again, because I don't think we're particularly well role modeled it in our society and around like it's okay to show your emotions and it's okay. And it's really important that we see other people being emotional and managing it in order to know how to manage it. Otherwise, how would we know, right? If I've never seen anybody get angry and handle their anger in a healthy way, then anger might seem like a really scary thing to me. Anger is actually a really good example because it's one of the most common emotions that people fear, often because they've had really scary experiences in the past of it and they've not been shown how to manage it and it's not been normalized. Often sort of like, it's not a good thing. I didn't feel angry. It's not professional or it's not nice or it's not, there's all sorts of stories about anger. And one of the things we do is actually just talk about anger and kind of re-educate that person so they can understand that it is a really, really healthy, normal emotion and it's totally okay to get angry. Can actually be really helpful. And then to think through different ways they might start to learn to how to express it. It can be quite scary, but you can do it in really small, contained ways. So you might experiment with doing a bit of angry writing and you might just do it for 2 minutes. Set a timer for 2 minutes, write down whatever you want, right? Often it's good to try a physical one. So like I'm a puncher. So I punch, if I get angry, I've learned that if I punch a cushion, that really helps me to get my anger out, right? It doesn't hurt anybody, it doesn't hurt me, but it gets my anger out. I feel better. And I've learned by doing it a little bit that actually it didn't overwhelm me. Like the first time I did it, the first time I tried it, it was a bit like scary. And what if I'm never be able to stop? But actually it does, it does stop. But yeah, set a timer, try it for 2 minutes. Punch a punch bag, stomp on some cardboard boxes. There's all sorts of different ways we can do it. Just try a little bit, something that feels okay, safe enough for you. Planning it can help because then it is a bit more contained. It's not out the blue. And then just, try it and see. And often people will be pleasantly surprised how quickly they feel better and how quickly they really appreciate now having some go-to ways to manage that emotion. And it's the same with any emotion. You can do it with sadness and even things like joy and happiness. Some people find happy emotions really uncomfortable. If we just do it gently, little by little, we'll learn. Human beings are incredible. They have such capacity for learning and emotions always pass. They might feel like they're not going to, but have you ever had an emotion that didn't pass? No? I've never met anyone that's had an emotion that didn't pass. So yeah, eventually we learn that and then we get a bit more comfortable. But you know what? We never take away that some emotions are hard. And that is a truth of human life. Like I have no magic pill or magic wand that I can wave that can say you're never going to feel sad or you're never going to feel angry and it's not going to feel unpleasant because that's what the emotions are like. But what we learn is not to fear them as much.
Yeah, so it's something about normalizing at the beginning and recognizing this is part of being a human. This is part of being a person. These emotions are part of the range. And if we try and shut them out, the difficult ones, we end up being numb to everything. And actually we lose some of the joy or the expansiveness of life, all of the different kind of flavors and colors of being alive.
You can't selectively numb out emotion. I wish we could, but that's why we reach for things like substances like alcohol or drugs. People are like, right, I've just got to blank this out. I've got to shut this down. But if we do that, we also shut out the other emotions. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. For me, I'm the joyful doctor. People are like, quite curious. It's a fun name. What does it mean? For me, being joyful is actually not about being happy all the time. Far from it. It's about experiencing all of life's emotions and all of life's experiences and being able to be grateful and enjoy the positive ones and tolerate and get through sometimes the more negative ones. And
that's amazing. And I think that's a really powerful place. Finally, if you could leave the listeners with 2 choice-based takeaways, so small but powerful choices that might help them to start living with a little more permission, what would you encourage them to do?
I would say start writing the sentence, I give myself permission to ... and finishing it for yourself. And just do that on scraps of paper, on your phone, everywhere you go, or in your head. Just start asking the question because you will know. When you ask the question, if you listen to the answer, you'll know what you need in that moment. And I think my second one is ask what would make this easy.
I love both of those. And I think mine are very similar. It's about, can we just find the odd pause in our busy, busy lives to listen, to notice what are my needs around this situation? What matters to me here? And what do I need to give myself permission for at this moment? And then maybe making a choice that then honors that value about what really matters to me and how can I lean into, is it connection, finding some space for myself? Is it decompression? What tiny choice could I make that actually that's where I'll put my permission today?
Love it.
I think we could keep talking about this, Caroline, for a really long time. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such an interesting conversation, and I would strongly recommend that people do read your book, because it goes into this in a lot more depth, and it's such a lovely read. It's really powerful.
Thank you for having me. It's been really lovely.
Thank you for listening to the Choice Space podcast. I hope this conversation has offered a little more room to pause, breathe, and find your own way forward. We've linked the ways you can connect with Caroline in the show notes, including a link to her book, Permission. And if today's episode has been helpful, please download and share with someone who might value the space as well. I'd love to have you with me for the next episode. Until then, take care and keep making space for what matters most.